were you blown away by your own stupidity? Story 1. I recently went to pick up an order of glasses. The optician asked me to try them on, to see if they fit well. I told him this must be someone else's order. Because everything was blurry, he was surprised and started hunting through boxes, and I kept squinting and looking around at blurry shapes. We did this for 10 minutes before the optometrist walked in. He explained the issue and the optometrist paused and asked where I put the glasses I was wearing when I walked in. I said I was wearing contacts, and I put the new glasses over my contacts. I asked the optometrist if this gave me double the perfect vision, and she replied, "If you mean double vision, sure." Story 2. I once was cooking mac and cheese and started squeezing the cheese sauce in before draining the water. When I realized the mistake, I grabbed the cheese sauce with my hands, and that just made everything worse in every way. Story 3. During the holidays, I walked through an arts craft store trying to find something very specific. After finding out they didn't have it, I got in a long line to check out. It didn't hit me that I didn't have anything to buy until it was my turn. I just walked past the cashier, waved, and said, "Have a nice day." It was night, FML. Story 4. In school one day, my friend had a pen that lit up when you pressed it to paper, or if you flicked a switch on the pen the lights would flash. He kept turning it on and waving it at me. This annoyed me, so I took the batteries out in front of him. He stared at me for a second before trying to get the batteries back. In the midst of the struggle, I decided the best way to stop him from getting them, so I popped them in my mouth, then proceeded to swallow them. My friend returned to staring at me, but with a panicked look on his face. I didn't think anything of it at first, but eventually I realized that I shouldn't have done that. I started feeling weird. I held my hand up and asked my teacher if I could go to the nurse's office. Skeptical, she asked me why. I told her I had just eaten 3 small batteries and was feeling weird. She stared in disbelief, I think for a second, then told the class that she'll return in a moment and immediately seized my hand and practically dragged me along, sprinting to the nurse's office. She threw me into the nurse's office and screamed he swallowed batteries. The nurse jumped up out of her chair. "Oh my God, I'll ring the NHS and find out what we need to do." I immediately felt like the stupidest idiot alive. I asked if I was going to be okay. My teacher looked at me and smiled the fakest smile I've ever seen in my life. "Of course you're a boy." Long story short, I had to be taken to AE and had to be x-rayed to see where the batteries were. They had reached my stomach, so I was at risk of the stomach acid melting the metal coating and the battery acid entering my stomach. I was given laxatives and a sieve, and kept overnight, of which I spent 75 of the sifting through my sludgy bowel movements like some crazed Wild West miner scouring for gold. Eventually found them and I've lived happily ever after since, thankfully. I wish I still had them, a trophy of the stupidest I've ever been. Edit fixed a few words. Story 5. Birthday is March 12th. In high school I saw that my birthday was going to fall on a Thursday. So I was like, oh wow, Thursday the 12th. I proceeded to scan the next couple of decades on my iPod Touch calendar to find out if my birthday would ever fall on Friday the 13th. To those curious, no, my March 12th birthday doesn't ever fall on Friday the 13th. All not my proudest moments, not my worst. Story 6. In high school, I woke up on a day where very icy weather was expected and couldn't find school closings on TV. I begrudgingly got ready for school, stepped out my front door, and immediately slipped on ice, landing flat on my back. Got up, shook it off, and cursed the school for not being closed. I had to crawl my way up a hill to the bus stop because I kept slipping down ice on the way there. Got to the bus stop and waited over half an hour for it to get there. Checked my watch repeatedly, getting more and more angry each time. Finally decide that they must have cancelled school and slowly make it back home, where I see a clock. It was now 2:30 a.m., checked my watch repeatedly. Story 7. The first time my husband took me to a fancy restaurant. I grew up on the US-Mexico border, so I'm used to the word con being within food, chili con carne, arroz con pollo, you get the drift. Husband takes me to a fancy restaurant when we're still dating and am poor AF, so prior to this for me fancy was Olive Garden. I pick something out for dinner and he says, "Do you want an appetizer?" I said, "I don't care. You pick one, I've got to run to the restroom." I come back and sit down and he says, "I ordered the duck confit pastry appetizer." All I can picture is the end of A Christmas Story with the goose with its head still on being served at dinner. I'm kind of horrified but don't say anything, but I'm expecting us to be handed a duck with the feet still attached. So the appetizer comes and it's these little pastry cups with cubes of I presume chopped up duck inside, and I look at him and say, "So are the feet in there too?" It's duck confit, not duck confit, and I'm never living that down. Story 8. I walked around my apartment talking to my mom on the phone and continued getting more and more frustrated. My mom noticed and asked what was wrong, and I said I just can't seem to find my phone. It kicked in about 5 seconds later. Story 9. I live in a big city and used to own a car, have since sold it, and one night a friend was getting married pretty close to my apartment. There was a small pregame going on the other side of the city, so I drove down to meet up with everyone and was going to just drive back to my place with everyone in my car, park it back at my apartment, then we'd all just walk down to the ceremony together. We ended up running a bit late and there were more people than could fit in my car, so we just grabbed an Uber so we wouldn't have to wait for parking. I left my car by my friend's house in 2-hour parking, but that ended like 30 minutes after I parked and didn't apply on Sunday, which was the next day. Fast forward to 2 weeks later. Since I usually walked to work and never had to use my car, I usually needed a minute to remember where it was parked when I needed it. After looking for it for around 5 minutes it hit me, conclusion, and TLDR I left my car in 2-hour parking 2 weeks ago. Story 10. As a child, I decide to close my eyes and walk around, to experience the world like a blind person might. I stretched my arms out in front of me so I wouldn't walk face first into anything, but that didn't stop an open door from passing undetected between my hands at just the right angle and smashing me square in the nose. Story 11. Told this story before, but possibly worth sharing again. When I was a kid, I once ate the inside of my wall because I thought it was a wafer cookie. For whatever reason, there was a hole in my wall right above my sofa, and one day a part of the wall fell onto the sofa. I saw the bits of wall on the sofa. I realized there was a hole in the wall right above it, and so I clearly remember picking up a piece of the wall and thinking to myself, this is probably the wall, but I couldn't shake the possibility that it could be crumbled wafer cookies, so I took the risk and ate the wall bits that fell on the sofa. And for whatever dumb reason, even after I quickly realized it didn't taste like wafer cookies, I finished the rest of the wall sediments, thinking that maybe the piece I initially ate was wall, but perhaps the rest of the pieces on the sofa were in fact wafer cookies. I was not a smart boy. Story 12. I legitimately forgot the word piano a few years ago. I was trying to describe a situation to someone, and I blanked. I tried to remember, but I kept saying panio instead. They corrected me, and it all just fell into place in my head. Weirdest sensation of my life. I don't know how to describe it. Felt hella dumb afterwards. Story 13. I was applying for a job that required an off-site aptitude test, and it included a study guide for math. I realized that not practicing fractions in 10 or so years was humbling. I nearly had a meltdown because I just couldn't grasp how fractions worked again. Math truly is a language. If you don't use it, you lose it. I never did take the test because I got a job offer elsewhere, but I was dreading coming to terms with how dumb I had become since school. Story 14. I grew up in a trailer park, in a trailer heated by propane gas. When I was 16, a blizzard hit my area really hard and my mom was worried because immediately prior to the storm she thought she smelled propane just outside and was concerned about us having a leak. About 10 o'clock at night the heater started acting funny and my mom, fully convinced of the leak at this point, asked me to go out back and check to the propane tanks, see if they still had gas, and if so how much, so I begrudgingly throw on some clothes and head out into 2 feet of snow. As get around the back of the trailer, near the tanks, I slipped and dropped my flashlight, which promptly died, but a light bulb goes off in my head. I'm a smoker and never go anywhere without my Zippo, so I light it up and start poking around the tank to read the meter and see if I can smell any propane. And then it finally sinks in. I'm looking for a propane leak with an open flame, so I was figuratively and almost literally blown away by my own stupidity. Some real Darwin nominee material that night. Story 15. When I was a kid, my mom accidentally burned some food she was cooking as in, it was actually on fire. I heroically leaped to the rescue to put it out, by hitting it with a napkin. No, I don't know what I was thinking either. Story 16. This morning, I was installing a door. After cutting the hole and putting the in to make sure the door closed properly, I opened the door and began looking for the door so I could install it, for 25 minutes, which was in the god door still. Story 17. I got in my car after class one day and there was a note that said you left your keys in car, and car on, please be careful. Luckily they turned it off for me and left the keys on the seat. Story 18. I have a master's degree, a professional designation. I've won professional awards for work in my field, so help me God. I thought the dirty clean magnet on the dishwasher flipped itself. Edit. Thanks for the gold. My wife still contends that this kind of stupidity shouldn't be rewarded, but here we are. Story 19. I live in Florida. During the 2004 hurricanes we lost power, so all the neighbors got together for a little cookout, so we could share and cook the food so it didn't go to waste. It was starting to get dark, so I pointedly asked why no one had turned on the porch light. Every single one of them looked at me as if I were stupid. Then it hit me, oh, there's a reason why we can't turn on the porch light. Story 20. Once, I was walking through a doorway and a person was walking through the opposite direction at the same time. We both repeatedly tried to get out of each other's way, only to get in each other's way again. Every time I tried to get out of the way, so did he. Every time I tried to walk through the doorway, so did he. This went back and forth for about a few seconds before I realized the door was closed and the other guy was my reflection. Story 21. Drove up to traffic lights and joined a row of cars on the left side of the road. Took me several minutes to figure out that the cars in front of me were parked and weren't waiting for the green. Story 22. The brief moment when I asked what kind of nuts were in a macadamia nut cookie before the horror set in that I'm just thoroughly stupid. Edit spelling. Story 23. One time I was out in the rain and I was really cold and my fingers were icy, but my feet were warm in their socks. I said with so much confidence, man, I really wish they made socks for your hands. The look on my friend's face was priceless. Do you mean gloves? I was astonished. Story 24. At my SO's parents' house and getting hot and heavy in the shower. They have a second house on their land and usually well crash there when we visit them. So her dad is knocking hard on the door to the house and isn't letting up, and we can hear it from the bathroom. So I get out, quickly get some clothes on and answer the door like nothing's happening. He asks can I come in, like to the house, not the bathroom, and I say not really, so now it's immediately clear to him what's happening and he leaves embarrassed. My so is about ready to die inside, she's so embarrassed. And I'm the most embarrassed just for how stupid it was to not just say yeah come in. I was dressed, she was in the shower. There was zero evidence of canoodling until I told him there was. Probably the stupidest thing I've ever done. I filled my mom's gas tank with diesel because the nozzle was green and green means go. Story 25. I am old as you will see. When we first got personal computers in the accounting department, we had 100 employees and only 3 personal computers to share. Since we were all new to personal computers, we weren't so careful about backups yet. I was reformatting diskette. I used the DOS command del star. I was on the C drive. I erased the work of hundreds of files from dozens of people, none of whom had backed up. Worst day ever. Story 26. IF30 was at work and my colleagues all M50 talked about electric cars and the fake engine sound they have to make. I asked what the sound is for and someone answered so that for example blind people can hear the car. I started laughing hysterically and said but blind people shouldn't be driving electric cars, thinking that for some reason, blind people wanted a nice sound while driving. Story 27 happened just now actually. Was reading a pretty long physical newspaper article while waiting for something on my computer with one of my hands on the mouse. As I kept reading, I tried to freaking scroll down the article with the mouse. All I had to do was to look at the rest of the article with my eyes. I was frustrated for a bit before realizing how much of an idiot I am. Story 28. Once I was packing for a trip and decided to bring my hair straightener, but I was worried it would turn on in my suitcase and start a fire. I decided to wrap the power cord really securely around it to cover the on switch. It didn't hit me until I got to the end of the cord and saw the plug. Story 29. I remember a time when I was about 8. I got to school and everything was fine as usual. Some moments passed before I realized I lost my backpack. It wasn't in the usual places and thus I began to panic. I ran around the entire playground with feelings of pure dread and anxiety. I then began to dissociate with reality. A few more moments pass and I see my older brother. I run to him and explain the situation, struggling to speak. It's on your back, he says. It was on my back. I'm still coming to terms with it 17 years later. Edit. I'm really tired and baked. I forgot how to grammar. Don't sue me. Story 30. Not understanding that Hooters referred to breasts until about 2 years ago. It was during a conversation with my wife. Also found out that the 2-0 in Hooters were. Story 31. Got up in the middle of the night, went in the shower and started shampooing my hair. Immediately realized WTF am I doing? Finished washing my hair anyway, jacked off and went back to sleep. Edit. Since it's happened to a lot of you, one of the reasons could be too much stress or overexertion. Makes the mind overactive and it does this. So I guess all of us need to chill out a bit and give ourselves a break. Story 32. When I discovered the true use case for that the seemingly useless Velcro strap on the back of my laptop bag was actually to slide over the handle of a roller bag. Previous to this, I would put the briefcase on top of the bag and hold both handles somewhat awkwardly. One day I checked my bags at a hotel and when I went to pick them up, the strap had been properly used and my mind was blown. No idea how I could be that dumb. Story 33. Not sure how we got into it, but I basically admitted to my wife that I thought wind was caused by all the mountains pushing the air around based on the Earth's rotation. She laughed for a day straight. Story 34. I had too much fun one night and ended up puking. Yeah, I know. Anyway, some of it got on my phone but not too much. Me still drunk, I'm sure. Decided to clean it off by running it under the faucet. I watched it die in my hands. It was one of those great yes, this is the consequence of that action moments. I wasn't angry at myself, just bewildered at my own stupidity. Story 35. Once upon a time, I was punked by a fellow worker who gave me an official-looking film badge that was fogged by a significant amount of ionizing radiation. A phony ID card was provided that gave the name and the organization of his affiliation at the Nevada test site. I went to work immediately to discover where this individual could have received such a high dosage of radiation. It wasn't actually harmful, but it exceeded guidelines on permissible exposure by a factor of 10. I called and called, but no one knew of this person. I doggedly kept on trying until I saw this prankster peering into my office with a grin on his face, tinged with a little concern. At about this point I realized that the name given was my name spelled backwards. Story 36. Okay, so the reason I asked this is because today I bought a little tiny mini drone, cute little thing, and it flies probably better than any other I've controlled. Anyway, I played with it for about 5 minutes and decided to land it and charge it. I pushed the auto land button and started to guide it down. The thing was facing me, so when I pushed left it went right. Duh. I panicked. That cute little drone exactly like a swish shot into a big glass of ice water that was half full on the end table. Drone sank like a rock, currently drying out. Story 37. I was chatting with a friend on the phone for about a half hour while taking the transit home. Shortly after hanging up I began to panic, thinking I had lost my phone and began frantically searching my pockets and bag. Took about 10 seconds to realize my phone was still in my hand. I had been searching for it while it was still in my hand. Story 38. Many years ago, while on charge of quarters duty while in the army, one of my tasks was driving out to the fuel pumps twice a night, making sure they were still padlocked and that the readings were the same as reported when I went on duty. During my second check 330400 AM, the pump meters were fogged up and I couldn't read them. I didn't have a flashlight, so I got my lighter out and started peering at the meters by the light of the flame. All of a sudden I thought, dear God, what am I doing? And put the lighter out. In my defense, I'd been up for 23 hours by that point. Story 39. I was famous in college for making drunk mac, which was just boxed mac and cheese, but since everyone was wasted it was delicious. Well, one time I started making it, turned the heat on, put the noodles in the pan, stirred it around. Me friend pointed out that I should probably put water in there, but I loudly announced I know what I'm doing. So I burnt the out of the noodles and up that pan forever. But it gets worse better. I scraped some out of the pan into a bowl and, oblivious as I was, took a bite of dry, burnt noodles. and yelled out, "This tastes like," yeah, needless to say I never made drunk mac again, and it's been over a decade since then. Story 40 Ugh, so this still embarrasses me every time I think about it. When I was 16 I went to go get gas and pulled up to a pump on the wrong side of my car. I got out, realized my mistake, and drove around the pump in a circle and pulled up to the one in front of it, got out, ready to pump, and to my disappointment, I eventually went inside the gas station and asked the cashier for help, and he got in my car and did it for me. Oh, such a nice guy, and I'm sure they all had a good laugh about it later. I for some reason just couldn't understand what I needed to do. It was ridiculous, and I still facepalm just thinking about it. Story 41 When I was in high school, we had a dog that liked to dig holes under the gate in the chain link fence in our backyard. I walked to and from school. The back of the house led to a side street that I took to get to school, so I always came and went from the back door. One day when I got home from school, I saw that my dad had placed a large rock in the hole right in front of the gate to stop the dog from getting out. This annoyed me because the rock was too big for me to move on my own, so I couldn't pull the gate open like I usually did. So I walked all the way around to the front door, super annoyed, pushing the gate open never having occurring to me, straight A student by the way, and when my dad got home it still hadn't occurred to me that I could have pushed the gate open. I complained about being locked out of the backyard, and my dad teased me about it for years, said I was straight out of a Far Side comic. Story 42 Today at uni I left my computer at the library, went to the toilet and came back. My computer was turned off, monitor wouldn't turn on, the computer desktop just wasn't working. I thought ID lost some of the work I'd been writing. Took me a good 5 seconds before I realized ID sat next to the faulty computer next to mine. ID spent a good 15 seconds sitting right next to my computer and not noticing that ID sat in the wrong seat. Story 43 Back in college I'm working as a cook at the Ground Round. I had been working there for probably 6 months. It's the middle of the day, slow, I'm the only one in the kitchen. I'm cooking one lonely burger, just staring blankly at the burger on the grill when it dawns on me. The Ground Round. Aha, I get it. Story 44 Coming back from my work cafe, proudly clutching a baked potato for lunch. Got off the elevator and run into a lady who sees me and goes, "Oh, what are you having?" Important to note here that I am about 7 months preggo at the time, but this doesn't really register in my mind as she is asking me this pointed question, and it's lunchtime so that's what's on my mind. I turn and look her dead in the eye and reply, a potato. I turn and leave and go back into my office, sit down, and it hits me like a train. She wasn't asking about my lunch, she wanted to know the of the baby. Sorry strange lady, it's a girl. Story 45 Okay, this is probably going to sound super absurd, but before I sleep I'll think of a thought and then a few minutes later I'll think did I really think that, or am I just thinking right now that I thought it falsely? Story 46 For the longest time, I didn't know how the maps at the mall knew where I was. Anytime I asked anyone, they just laughed. One day it clicked for me and I only felt shame. Story 47 When I was much younger, I thought it would be a good idea to remove the keys from my keyboard and to put them back in alphabetical order. My thought process is if they're in an order I already know, it'll be much easier to type. It wasn't until I started typing that I realized I was retarded, and that's not how key inputs work. Story 48 I was vacuuming the house and I got to the part of the basement farthest from the router, and I thought to myself, will the vacuum even work over here? The Wi-Fi is really bad, I slapped myself. Story 49 In college, biking everywhere, proud of myself for learning how to ride without using my hands. Eventually stepped it up to see how far I could coast without feet on the pedals. A little reckless perhaps, but not immensely stupid. Brain checked out when I wanted to step it up another notch. Decided to see if I could brake without using my hands, as in, pulling the handbrake with my foot. Well, I did stop quickly. Story 50 was at a music festival, had a few beers, nothing special. Then during one of the acts a huge man 2 meters stood on my foot. He didn't realize straight away and I was hurting, but my brain stopped working, so I said, MIUW, still don't know what is wrong with me. Story 51 I was fixing my dog's food and my little sister food. Gave the dog food to my sister and my sister's food to my dog. For a good 10 seconds I forgot a green light meant go on a light. I didn't know it's raining men is a innuendo until I wad 20. I thought it was about paratroopers. Story 52 My time to shine. I worked at a 711 and on my first day I'm scanning someone's items, and once I'm done I with a straight face asked the customer, "Okay, how much is that?" I was like 16 at the time and a social idiot. Story 53 I usually pat my pants as I leave to make sure I have my phone, wallet and keys. One day before work I went to do the usual patting ritual: phone, wallet, wait, where are my keys? I start looking around frantically for them. Then I realize I am in my car, driving to work with my keys in the ignition. Story 54 Sort of hard to explain, but one time an adapter style plug thing I was in Europe came apart as I was pulling it out of the plug, so part of it was still stuck in the receptacle in the wall and it now had metal prongs sticking out of it. I needed to get it out, so I grabbed the metal prongs to pull it out. Wowza, that hurt. The worst electric shock I've ever gotten. And I was alone. Remember thinking afterwards that I got lucky, it was just a nasty shock. Story 55 My aunt, who was visiting from the United States, commented on how weird it was that Saturday Night Live aired on Thursdays in our country. Me really, what day does it air on in the US? The worst part was that it took a solid minute of laughter before I understood what was wrong with that question. Story 56 I once wanted a burger with an egg on top, like you see in food commercials. I proceeded to crack an egg and pour it on my still cooking burger on a grill. It poured off immediately, It still took me some time to realize that no, you don't get the burger hot enough to instantly cook the egg, you cook it separately. Story 57 today. I carried 2 bags out of the house on my way to work. One was garbage, and the other was my lunch. I threw away my lunch and brought the bag of garbage into the car with me and didn't realize until I got to work and reached for my lunch. Story 58. I was playing a game at a fair when I was a teenager where you won tickets and you needed some insane number, like 30k tickets to win an Xbox. Well, there was one game you could win tickets every time you won a spin, basically a 25 chance to win, and then do a double or nothing after you won. By some miracle I doubled my already large haul something like 5 times in a row, netting me enough tickets for an Xbox. A small crowd had gathered and was cheering me on, and the man running the booth was egging me on to do one more double or nothing, and me, in my idiotic youth, got swept up in the crowd and rolled again and lost everything. There wasn't even 2's box. Story 59. When I was a kid, my dad would tell me to stop listening to music so loudly through headphones cause I'd go deaf. At the age of like 6, I was genuinely scared of this, and every once in a while would take my headphones out and wait for someone to make a sound before resuming listening to music. So just to be clear, I would stop listening to music in order to confirm I hadn't gone deaf. Story 60. I suggested that I go second first in the line. That same day my director was listing out dates for rehearsals and I was checking every time to make sure they weren't on a specific date because I had plans. She states that the rehearsal will be on a Wednesday. Me, having asked my friend every time if certain dates were a Thursday, asked him if Wednesday was on a Thursday. Story 61. I lost my phone, knew it was on silent. My husband and I searched our entire house top to bottom, drove 45 minutes to the last place ID had it and searched the entire building and parking lot. Came back home and searched again, searched my office, searched our vehicles. Finally gave up, sat down on the couch, and I picked up my phone to go online and order another phone. It was on the coffee table. We cut a hole in our couch searching for it, while it was 8 inches away, on the coffee table. Story 62. 2 very different examples. One, do y'all know that clip from years back where Ben Shapiro is trying to debunk climate change and winds up making the case that if the sea levels rise and people's houses start flooding, those people can just sell their homes and move? A friend showed me that. She was just about herself with laughter. And I just stare at it like, what's the problem? She had to explain it to me. I have never felt that dumb. Too much worse. I had 2 grandaunts who had Alzheimer's. Now in the spring, one of them passed, and good for her. Honestly, she was still quite coherent, and then just fell ill and died in a week. A very good death altogether. I live halfway across the country, so I didn't even get to see her in the hospital. She died the day I was coming. I stay for the funeral. Summer comes. I move to live with my parents while I work my summer job, and I basically have no idea what is happening outside it because work's quite stressful. Other grandaunt and her husband have their 60-year anniversary or something. It's really sweet. Autumn, I move back to where I'm studying, and at some point I realize I have no idea whether it was 1 grandaunt that died or 2. Can't ask anyone, obviously. Worry about this for like a week before it comes back to me. Now, I have issues with my mental health and those can cause forgetfulness, but Jesus Christ, that's quite extreme. Edit added the flooding thing to the first one. Quite an important detail for anything to make sense. Story 63. Just after DVDs came out I said wait. Did you rewind it, before ejecting it from the DVD VCR combo? That monstrosity eventually fell and broke my foot. Story 64. Tried to close the door of the meat case when I worked at a deli. It wouldn't shut, so I just kept slamming the thing over and over again. I looked down, and the plastic zipper to the bag I just tossed in had gotten in the way, and was now completely obliterated. Story 65. I was at my girlfriend's house minding my own business when I overheard her half-brother who had dropped by their home for some quick reason mention a unique girl's name. I loved the sound of the name and remembered that my girlfriend had told me she hated it, but I forgot why, so I pop out from around the corner with, I love that name. I can't believe you hate it, babe. Why do you hate that name? The room goes dead silent. My girlfriend was staring daggers at me. I could tell I something up, but I didn't know what. Then my girlfriend's mom bursts laughing and tells me, that's because that's the name of her half-brother's mother. I noped the of that room so fast I must have left an afterimage. Story 66. I was extremely tired and fed up with paperwork at the time, and I had to send an application local via mail. I'm a terrible procrastinator. Sent it out hopefully just in time. Got it back 2 days later. I mailed it to myself. Story 67. My analog watch stopped. Me proclaiming the dumbest most obvious joke in the world and then heaping a pile of stupid on top. Well, at least it will be right twice a day. Unless it stopped on one of those times that only comes once a day, SMH. Story 68. When I was 12, my youth group went to a retreat and stopped at a Subway on the way there. After getting the sandwich made and getting chips I asked for a drink to be added on. The lady said something like, okay, that'll be some number over $8. I thought that she meant the drink by itself was $8. I said I changed my mind, that was too expensive for a drink. She tried to explain to me that it was the total, but I didn't get it. My friend in line behind me also explained, and I still didn't get it. It literally took both of them frustratingly explaining over and over how money worked for me to get it. I still cringe thinking about that to this day. You bet that lady will tell that story until she dies, and would be surprised that I even passed grade 6, my grade at the time. When meeting my new neighbor he introduced himself as Steven. When he saw me put Steven in my phone's contacts he corrected me and said it was spelled with a PH. My thought that meant it was spelled Fevin instead of the very obvious Stephen. It took me several hours until I realized my mistake. Story 69. I somehow convinced myself that the band 30H3 was pronounced Ohio and that they band formed in Ohio. Imagine my shock when I found out it's pronounced 303 and they're from Boulder, Colorado.